out of all the field, how many were there? 17 to begin with?
Yeah, I think so.
17 candidates. They come up with Ted Cruz.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington.
Steve Timmer is co-founder of the political blog site LeftMN, which blog site regularly covers mostly Minnesota state politics. Steve also regularly mixes it up with Minnesota's premier political operatives and observers. He does so in a Northeast Minneapolis saloon. The Drinking Liberally meetup honkers down to the 331 Club. The joint is appreciated for its blue-collar prices, its eclectic patrons, and its live music. Steve, welcome back to Democratic Visions.
Thank you.
Now, the last time you were here, we were doing high fives because it was in 2012 and we were coming off a great election season where we beat down 2 awful constitutional amendments and we celebrated electing 3 Democrats in the Senate District 49 area. But I want to start with the Democratic presidential contest. Now, I know that your blog site, LeftMN, has formally endorsed Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Why'd you do that?
Well, let's see. He's an older, white-haired guy, little disheveled. I mean, what's not to like?
Oh, should we go on to the next question?
Yeah. No, actually, I suspect he will, in the end, be the nominee. Making education higher education more affordable for students, including the millennials, 2 of which I happen to have in my family. So he just seems like the candidate we need going forward, not the candidate of the status quo.
What do you think about those individuals that say he's going to get chewed up by the opposition if he gets the endorsement? Hillary Clinton has been scrutinized and pillared in the press, particularly the right-wing media, for the last 25 years. What's going to happen if they start concentrating the resources on Bernie? Do you think he's going to be able to maintain his posture as the candidate of change and progressive values?
Well, I think Bernie's a stand-up guy. I mean, I'm really not all that concerned about that. Bernie can raise money. He's outraised Hillary Clinton the last 3 months straight, and he's done it with $27 contributions from people all over the country. If you look at Hillary's performance over the last year or so, her numbers just continue to go down. Now that is always true of a front runner. I mean, they've only got one way to go. But essentially, Bernie's been on the rise. In the last couple of national polls, he's actually outpolled Hillary by a couple of percent.
But you know and I know, Steve, that polls at this point in time relative to presidential preference are, while not meaningless, are as close to meaningless as you possibly can, because, at least for one reason, you're not talking to people that are necessarily going to vote.
Right.
And you've already identified that the millennials are backing Bernie, but the millennials traditionally do not vote. Are they going to vote this time around?
Well, let's hope so.
Well, what if they don't? It could be, do you want a President Trump? Do you want a President Cruz?
No, I don't want either one of those. But I'm not convinced that Hillary does better against Cruz, especially. She does better against Trump. But again, in some of the national polling, Bernie does much better than Hillary does against either one of those 2.
I've heard, speaking of polling, that being labeled a socialist is a less attractive quality to voters than being labeled an atheist. Now, that's a pretty low denominator if that's the case. And how is Bernie going to get around the fact that up until 2015, when he registered as a Democrat, he was a socialist?
Among the millennials, the term socialist may be a feature, not a bug. And I don't see that. I see that as a potential problem, but I don't see it as a huge one. I guess we'll see. It's not troubling to me, obviously.
If you look at a map and it shows those states where Clinton has either won the caucus or won the primary, and the states where Sanders has either won the caucus or won the primary, you'll note that you have the Midwest and then the South going almost exclusively for Clinton. And I know that that's because the black vote is turning out for Clinton. Do you think that Sanders is going to be able to capture that black vote?
Well, where else will they go?
I don't know. Maybe they'll sit home.
Well, That's a possibility. You accuse my millennials of sitting home, so maybe the blacks will too.
I'm not accusing them. I'm just telling you that's what happens when you look at the polling or the voting records. They don't vote. I mean, a lot of them are voting. I'm not saying they're not all voting, but I don't think any candidate is going to realistically expect a Edina kind of turnout. 70% or so from millennials. I told you before the program that I was going to give you a pop-up question,
Sure.
Steve, and here it is. Tell me, if you can, who said this? The most serious thing facing us today is the concentration of money power in the hands of a few. Now, who do you think said that?
I know the quote. Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, I can't tell you.
Woodrow Wilson, 1911.
Okay.
What I'm trying to suggest, is that Bernie's main program of inequality has been in this country virtually forever.
Right.
And now I'm not saying you're not hearing me criticize that as a campaign to run on, but it's not as if it's a new idea.
No, of course it's not.
And the question then arises is, if it's the bane of this country since 1911, and we know before then, how can one person hope to change that focus?
Well, I mean, they can't, and Sanders has already said that. And I think what they do is they use the bully pulpit, and they try to persuade, they try to move the Overton window, as it's described. One of the things about Wilson, of course, was he was president during the Gilded Age, leading up to the Depression. And there was a big correction after the Depression, and we've been sort of moving away and becoming increasingly unequal in terms of economic outcomes for people ever since the Depression, and certainly since 1980. So in a way, it's deja vu in terms of the income inequality.
As you might surmise, I'm really focusing on electability when I eventually decide who I'm going to support. What I don't want is to see us nominate someone that's going to give us George McGovern all over again. 520 to 17 electoral college votes lost. I mean, that would be awful. And I really have to weigh in on whether Bernie, running as a socialist turned Democrat, is going to be able to appeal to and secure the votes of the independents out there in this country. But I assume, and you're telling me, that you're confident that he will be.
Well, I am. And I also think that trying to scare people into supporting a candidate is not a very good approach. Vote for me. Because the other guy will be a disaster for us.
Well,
I mean,
that's what Ted Cruz is saying.
Well, I know he is, but I mean which is another story. but my point exactly, perhaps.
Maybe.
Yeah, but you want to have a positive, optimistic program to run on, not a program of saying, oh, you got to vote for me because
the other guy's worse.
The other guy's worse. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, would this change your position at all if what has been written up in the national blog site Politico was to take place, where Clinton would select Al Franken as her vice president?
Well, I don't think Al would make a great vice president, to be honest with you. I like Al a lot.
Smart, aggressive, and very well connected. And not afraid to take up the cudgel when he would have to? I mean, that sounds like a pretty good vice president choice to me.
Well, it would be, but I mean, he does have the baggage of his comedian days. And he likes to say, well, I was a satirist, which is my preferred term too. But on the other hand, I mean, he would be a great attack dog. Tremendously funny guy and very quick-witted.
And a true progressive.
Yes, he is.
No question about that. All right, now I want to get back to the practical. Isn't it almost mathematically impossible for Sanders to secure the endorsement?
Both of them have approximately the same size hill to climb to get the nomination.
I don't think so.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's in terms of percentage of delegates that they need, Now, it may be that, you know, there was the superdelegate issue.
Well, so what? You know, we have to deal with the reality. There is a superdelegate faction in the party, and it's a substantial one.
All right, so if Sanders takes Pennsylvania, New York, and California, don't you suppose he'll be able to peel off some of those superdelegates?
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people, they're going to have to be persuaded that someone with Bernie Sanders' background is going to be able to win a general election, or they're not leaving Hillary. And this is just me speaking, because I think that there may be a genuine fear that at least if Hillary was to lose, she's going to lose respectfully, whereas Bernie might go down in a McGovern-esque kind of situation, which would be incredibly bad. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I don't mean to predict that, and God forbid, but I'm just putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's an elected official, which is quite often who the superdelegates are. So I'm not sure you're going to see a lot of these being peeled off. I don't know. You tell me. I don't know.
Well, I think I just did.
Yeah, okay. Steve, we have a non-binding presidential preference ballot, except for the fact that in Minnesota, it will divide up it will allocate the delegates between the presidential candidates. So of the 77 delegates to be elected in Minnesota, of the 93, 77 will be based upon the results of the vote taken at the caucus. Now, you were at the caucus, and it was chaotic, to say the least.
Right.
Wouldn't it make more sense to have that vote taken either on a separate day or perhaps all day prior to the caucus, so that people can come in, cast their vote, and stay for the caucus if they want to, or leave if they don't want to?
There seems to be some movement for that in Minnesota. It was chaotic. However, the primary voting in Arizona was chaotic as well. So it's not a panacea to say, well, we'll just do it the other way. I think I'm somebody who likes to encourage political participation.
That's a good point.
And if you make people come to the caucus, some of them will stay and actually listen and participate. A couple of my neighbors are actually going to be delegates at the convention.
Who hadn't planned to be before they showed up?
No, exactly.
Good.
And they haven't done it before. And so I would offer them as exhibits A and B of how the caucus, it can actually be a helpful thing sometimes.
Well, ideally, the caucus system rejuvenates the system every 2 years.
Right.
And I think that's to the betterment of the party, and if it's to the betterment of the party, I think it's to the betterment of the political system.
Right. Well, you know, the entire platform of the DFL started out as resolutions in precinct caucuses.
And that's the way it is right now. If you want a resolution, you bring it to the precinct caucus.
Right.
I've had people come up to me and say, can I bring a resolution to the Senate district? Right. Those resolutions start at the precinct level. Right. And it's kind of fun, to have people articulate ideas that you may not have thought of in the past yourself, or explain them in a different sense that you understand them better and either support them or not support them. We started this conversation talking about the vote count, delegate vote count between Sanders and Clinton, and we may disagree on the numbers, and who knows what the numbers are. But we did introduce the concept of superdelegate, and briefly speaking, again, in the Democratic Party, that's elected officials and party officials,
right,
by and large. Do you think that that's a bad idea, to allow individuals who haven't been elected in the contest at issue to be able to vote in that contest?
I blow hot and cold on the whole idea myself. I mean, the idea of having primaries and binding delegates was to get away from the smoke-filled rooms. If we go to a primary system in Minnesota for presidential preference, as people are talking about doing, I think we almost have to get rid of the superdelegates. I don't know how you can have the state run an election and then not have it entirely count. I can't see how that could be done. I wouldn't, on behalf of the state, want to get involved in a situation like that. It wouldn't seem to me to be a good idea.
But you know, this is inside baseball, because Minnesota can't eliminate the concept of superdelegates. It has to be done by the Democratic National Committee.
Right.
So the states could pass
Well,
a
I mean,
statute.
you're right. That's right. That would be a reason to me to think twice about going to a primary. I think we have, 93 delegates?
We do. 77 are elected at the various conventions, and the remaining 16, I think I'm accurate in that number, are superdelegates.
Sounds
so
about
it's about 1 out of 5, 1 out of
Right.
6, somewhere in between there, which is a big number, you know.
It is a big number.
Is it reasonable to, in a contested situation, to allow individuals that haven't been elected as a part of the nomination process to participate? And I'd be inclined to say no, it's not. But I don't know exactly how we can do that because, again, it's a national situation, and we're not an island. We can't do anything to change it unilaterally.
Okay. Well, you know, when the country was formed, the Senate was a body that was not popularly elected, and that was to tamp down the excesses of the Democratic masses. We concluded that wasn't a good idea at a certain point.
That's a good point. I know that you don't confine yourself to Democratic politics. What do you think is going to happen on the Republican side? Do you think that Trump is going to be able to take his plurality into a convention in Cleveland and come out as the nominee?
I suspect he will, in the end, be the nominee. I can't imagine that he goes into Cleveland with a plurality of the votes, and they wind up nominating
Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan. I mean, I think the people who believe that have been smoking something. It just isn't going to happen.
Isn't it Hobson's choice? They know that if they endorse Trump, they're going to have a candidate that's toxic to most of America. And if they don't endorse Trump, there's going to be a number of people that would otherwise vote Republican. They're not going to vote for whoever the nominee is.
Well, it is a Hobson's choice. I call it, do you want the plague or do you want the mange? Ted Cruz is wildly unpopular with the Republican establishment. He's practically nobody in the establishment supports him. Out of all the field, how many were there? 17 to begin with?
Yeah, I think so.
17 candidates. They come up with Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. Holy mackerel. How does that happen?
Well, I enjoy watching it because I detest all of those candidates, some more than others. But it's not good for sane political discourse to have to witness this.
Right.
And I think it's reducing politics to a cage match, which is going to be very difficult to overcome going forward. Who would you have thought would have been the best candidate that the Republicans could have promoted?
Governor Kasich, I think. I even came up with a bumper sticker for him.
Did you?
Yeah. Kasich. He's not a lunatic.
That's very good. And you know, there'd be a lot of people honking at you too.
Right, exactly.
Maybe giving you a salute.
Right.
Maybe all their fingers. I don't know, hard to say.
Exactly.
Kasich, he's a rock-hard conservative.
Well, he is, but I mean, he's not a lunatic. That's about the only thing you can say about him.
Well, let's take this further. Let's say Trump wins. Who's Trump going to appoint to the Supreme Court to replace Scalia?
I wouldn't touch that one with a poll. You know, when you talk about Trump being elected, if we have a terrorist event in the United States sometime in the summer or the fall, and Trump is the nominee, or Cruz for that matter, they'll become the president.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
That really shortchanges the collective intelligence of the American voter, and I don't subscribe to that.
We're awfully easy to scare these days.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing.
Yeah.
Is that we're easy to scare.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers, mostly Democrats, from Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington.